The 49ers travel to Green Bay, where their streak of 37 straight games in the regular season as favorites comes to an end, or should, barring some unforeseen thing happening before the game, as they're 2.5 point dogs against the Green Bay Packers. And the matchup I'm watching in this one, the first one right off the rip, is just these two quarterbacks, man. I think there were such high hopes
Yeah.
for Brock Purdy and Jordan Love in their respective offenses this season, and how high could their ceilings push. And now Purdy has been subjected to injuries at his skill positions, whereas Jordan Love has been subjected to injuries at his own body. And both of those things have really factored into the disappointing numbers we've seen from both. But I think both you see flashes of and think that down the stretch here, their best football could very well be ahead of them, especially with the 49ers finally kind of being close to full strength here this upcoming weekend with George Kittle coming back and obviously Christian McCaffrey in his third game back. So what do you think? Who comes out on top in that matchup between the two quarterbacks this weekend?
Well, first and foremost, it is interesting to see the two paths that these guys have taken to get to this spot in time, right? Like both of these groups have kind of underperformed for different reasons. Jordan Love has been unhealthy. Brock Purdy has dealt with a plethora of injury around him. But in this one, you get you get a little bit of your star power back for Brock Purdy. Christian McCaffrey, George Kittle. I think it could spell disaster for those guys up at Lambeau. No, seriously, the matchup's going to be great because Jordan Love is healthy, and we saw him make those type of explosive plays last week. Guy like Christian Watson comes on and gets himself a big day against the rival Bears. But that's what you want to see more of. You're going to want to see more of these risk taker type quarterbacks like Jordan Love, who can make these big type of plays for you, extend plays with his legs if he needs to, but isn't afraid of throwing interceptions, isn't afraid of failure, whether it's in the red zone against the Bears or whether it's in the middle of the field. I truly do respect and appreciate that brand of football, like like an undying confidence in myself. That's what Jordan Love has. And for Brock Purdy, we do know that he is helped a great deal by the stars around him, and there's no reason why he shouldn't feel confident going into Lambeau Field with Kyle Shanahan. You and I were just talking outside of the show about Kyle Shanahan, the great job he does of scheming up that run game, making the jobs of the offensive linemen really simple. They're not chasing down out leveraged mic points. They're not worrying about cutting off guys that they have no business trying to get to. They keep it simple, and I think for Brock Purdy the same thing. And when they go on the road, they have to keep it even simpler. And now they got George Kittle back in the lineup. I think it could spell a successful day for the Niners at Lambeau.
I do think we'll see offense, especially since weather's not too bad there. It's cold, but it's not too cold. It's the kind where you can still throw the ball, still run your offenses. And I do think both these offenses are just look primed to take that next step sort of down the stretch here if they can stay healthy. The one matchup I'm worried about as a Packers fan, and we hit off this one off the rip, the Packers run defense against this 49ers offensive line. And now when Christian McCaffrey's come back, it's honestly been a step backwards seemingly for this rushing offense. They really have not had the success with him right now. He just doesn't quite have his feet under him. He's not the guy we saw of old there over the past couple weeks, but that can obviously change quickly. The more reps he gets, the more comfortable he gets, and the more that Achilles feels like it's back to normal. But even still, the 49ers seemingly over the entire Kyle Shanahan era have had the Packers number when it comes to the running game. Multiple times in the playoffs, multiple times in the regular season. It just seems like they cannot get the stops when it matters most. And the guy I'm looking at in the middle of that Packers defense that I truly think has somewhat been responsible for their little defensive regression of late, that when he was out is when the defense was at their best, it's Quay Walker, the first round linebacker that drafted a couple years ago, third-year player. He has not made that step that they expected when they drafted him in the first round back in 2022. And in fact, looks even more hesitant at times than he has in the past. Whereas when Eric Wilson was out there, that guy was flying around making plays, man. I don't know if another game like that happens and they lose this one against San Francisco 49ers. I don't love calling for guys' jobs, but he is hurting them right now with his performance on the football field.
You talked about hesitation. I saw it last week where Caleb Williams was right there in the A-B gap, and Quay Walker was right there for him, and he pressed the triangle button instead of the tackle button. He went up for the tip. There was no throw. Caleb Williams extends the play with his legs. I see what you're talking about. I understand your complaints, Packers fans, and that's a first-round pick, you said. So, I mean, we got to have some conviction there. The matchup that we talked about earlier is Kyle Shanahan. Kyle Shanahan ability to control the time of possession. We know that this Packers team likes to have as many opportunities as they can. Their guy's not afraid to throw interceptions, and obviously along the way, he's going to throw a lot of touchdowns. Against the Bears, they limited some of those drives. They made the Bears stub their toe. I think if the Niners can just keep it first down marker to first down marker chain, just keep the chains moving, keep Jordan Love off the field, that'll be the matchup. It's all about Kyle Shanahan scheming this thing up.
Do we think that he subs Christian McCaffrey out a little bit more this week? Because through 2 weeks, he's played
I
darn
forgot
near
to
every
say
single
that.
snap.
I forgot to say that. I forgot to say this because you said it and it reminded me. We've had this conversation before. Christian McCaffrey comes back in. He was gassed in Tampa Bay. He's still getting his legs under him. John Breach said he's got sea legs. That's a good way to put it. He's still figuring it out. Also, when you're playing full speed after all this time off, it takes time to be able to see things. Okay, it takes time to be able to see the plays develop, leverage the second level defenders. And to your point, these other guys, they've been beating their head on the linebackers, gain of 5, gain of 10 the whole season. So I do agree with you. We don't have to just go out there and overuse Christian McCaffrey. We still need him down the stretch. So if we have to ramp him up slower, that should be the case.
Yes, through 2 weeks now, 118 yards on 32 carries. He's only missed less than 10 snaps over that span. So the role we saw from him before, where it was just, as about as every down back a role as exists in the NFL, they just said as soon as he's healthy, he's in it, which to me is wild because when I watch him, especially later in games, he doesn't look like their best back. He doesn't even look as good as Jordan Mason did out there when Jordan Mason was rolling. And now obviously he brings a different game in terms of receiving ability that those backups just flat out don't have.
But you're talking juice.
I'm not worried about
carry to carry juice. That's what you need. And if he's going to be as gassed as he is, if he's overused early as he has been, that's the kind of production you're going to get out of him. And Pete Prisco talks about it. Throw whoever you want in there. Just make sure they got a fresh tank of gas. And I'm talking about oxygen, make sure they're fresh. Because in that offense, you can hit home runs with most guys.
Except for Christian McCaffrey the past 2 weeks. Long of 13 on 32 carries over that span. Just that ain't the McCaffrey we know from old. So the only thing that worries me is not Christian McCaffrey, but that Kyle Shanahan will have some tricks up his sleeve. This is truly a must-win game for them at 5-5 with their schedule down the stretch, with really no gimmies remaining on this schedule. They're going to have a dogfight every single week, and after this,
they're
it only
in the
gets tougher
playoffs.
because they go to
They're
Buffalo.
In the playoffs right now. This is their playoffs.
Yes.
Like it starts.
So it's got to start because, maybe the Cardinals could falter, even though they have a very easy schedule going on down the stretch. But it's like, say the Cardinals falter. Well, then you got to compete with the Rams because the Rams are 5-5 too. Well, say the Rams falter. Well, then you got to compete with the Seahawks because the Seahawks are 5-5 too. So someone is going to have to rise to the top, and it's going to be difficult to do. If you drop this one to Green Bay and you drop next week to Buffalo, you could probably kiss this season goodbye for the San Francisco 49ers.